In the brutal world of Westeros, loyalty is a luxury, and decisions are often shaped by bloodshed, betrayal, and power struggles. But what if one of the most pivotal moments in Game of Thrones had gone differently? Picture this. What if Ned Stark had put aside his hatred for Tywin Lannister and forged an alliance with him instead? How would that change the fate of the Seven Kingdoms, the North, and the entire Stark family? This alliance, based on power, strategy, and cunning, would shatter everything we thought we knew about Westeros politics. Could it unite the North and the Westerlands into an unstoppable force? Could it prevent the Lannisters' rise to power or even transform them into allies instead of enemies? What would the consequences be for the Stark family, the Iron Throne, and the other houses caught in the web of this alliance? To understand the significance of this alternate timeline, we must first examine the bitter rivalry between the Starks and the Lannisters. This animosity started long before the events of Game of Thrones and was rooted in personal grievances. Ned Stark's hatred of the Lannisters began with the cruel death of his father and brother at the hands of Tywin Lannister. It only deepened when Tyrion Lannister, accused of pushing Bran Stark from the tower, was viewed as the architect of the Stark family's suffering. For years, these two families, both powerful in their own right, had been locked in a bitter feud. The Lannisters, wealthy and ruthless, had long sought to expand their influence across the realm, while the Starks, the noble rulers of the North, were bound by honor and loyalty. Their two ideologies clashed at every turn, with Ned Stark's sense of justice often placing him in direct opposition to the Lannisters' cunning and self-serving strategies. But what if Ned Stark, instead of continuing his relentless opposition to Tywin Lannister, had put aside his hatred and sought to form a partnership? What if, instead of trying to challenge the Lannisters at every turn, Ned saw the bigger picture one, where uniting with Tywin could provide an undeniable advantage for House Stark? An alliance between these two families would have been a formidable force. Tywin Lannister, for all his ruthlessness, was one of the most powerful men in Westeros. His wealth, military might, and political influence could have significantly bolstered the Stark family's position. In exchange, Ned Stark's leadership in the North could have strengthened Tywin's grasp over the entire realm. The North, traditionally isolated from the politics of the South, would no longer be at the mercy of the Lannisters or anyone else seeking to undermine their rule. With Tywin's resources at their disposal, Ned could have expanded the Stark influence, not just within the North, but beyond it, securing the Riverlands, the Vale, and possibly even the Westerlands. This new power structure would have united key regions of the realm. Tywin's vast army, bolstered by Stark men-at-arms, could have suppressed any rebellions or resistance from rival houses. Instead of facing the crushing weight of war and political maneuvering, the Starks and Lannisters could have led a unified Westeros. The implications of such an alliance would have reached beyond the military. By joining forces with Tywin, Ned Stark could have gained leverage over the Iron Throne itself. King Robert Baratheon, weakened by his own internal struggles, might have been kept in check by the combined might of the Stark-Lannister alliance. Tywin's shrewd political mind and Ned's honorable reputation could have provided the stability that the kingdom needed, without the bloodshed and chaos of the war that eventually came. But could Ned Stark, with his deeply ingrained sense of honor, ever truly accept Tywin Lannister as an ally? Tywin's methods were driven by pragmatism, often at the expense of morality. He would do whatever it took to secure his family's power, regardless of who got hurt in the process. On the other hand, Ned's values were grounded in justice and honor. Could these two conflicting ideologies really work together? Would Ned's morality be compromised in order to gain power, or would the alliance fall apart from the very start? It's also important to consider how this alliance would have affected the other houses in Westeros. The Tyrells, the Martells, and even the Baratheons, all of whom were vying for power, would have had to reconsider their positions. The Tyrells, in particular, had been a key player in the political landscape and could have seen the Stark-Lannister alliance as a direct threat. The Martells, always looking for opportunities to rise in power, might have found themselves forced to join forces with the Starks and Lannisters or face a war they couldn't win. In this alternate reality, the War of the Five Kings might never have happened. Without the animosity between the Starks and Lannisters, there would have been no need for the rebellion that tore the realm apart. The Lannisters might not have gained control of King's Landing in the bloody chaos that followed, and the Iron Throne could have remained in the hands of a more stable ruler. Even the Targaryens, who were exiled after Robert's rebellion, could have been kept at bay by a united front between Ned and Tywin. The ripple effects of a Ned Stark-Tywin Lannister alliance would stretch far beyond just military power and territorial control. It would redefine the political landscape of Westeros in ways no one could have predicted. The Lannisters, despite their ruthless tactics, were the richest family in the realm, and their military prowess was unrivaled. By aligning himself with Tywin, Ned would gain access to these unparalleled resources. But would this alliance bring true stability, or would it merely mask the underlying tensions between honor and power? The first major consequence of this alliance would be the strengthening of House Stark's position in the realm. The North, long considered a remote and almost irrelevant region by Southern houses, would suddenly become an indispensable part of the political machine. The Starks, with Tywin's support, could have extended their influence into the Riverlands and the Vale. The Riverlands, historically a battleground for competing houses, would have been a logical extension of Stark control, and Tywin's vast wealth and strategic mind could have helped them secure it against any challenge. The Vale, a mountainous and isolated region, would also fall under Stark-Lannister control, providing a key advantage in the Game of Thrones. However, as we saw throughout Game of Thrones, power and politics are never straightforward. The alliance would have put the Starks in a difficult position, straddling the line between their own values and the reality of the political game. Tywin Lannister was not a man who operated on goodwill. His methods were harsh, calculating, and sometimes brutal. Would Ned, who valued honor above all else, be able to stomach the compromises required to maintain this alliance? Could the noble ideals of the North survive under the weight of Tywin's pragmatic, often merciless rule? This is where the true complexity of this partnership lies. For Tywin Lannister, Ned Stark would represent a useful, if sometimes frustrating, ally. Tywin was a master of manipulation and strategy, and he knew that Ned's sense of honor would make him predictable and asset in the cutthroat world of Westeros politics. But Tywin was not known for respecting the moral compass of others. Could he suppress his natural instinct to exploit Ned for his own advantage? Or would he push too far and end up betraying the very alliance he had worked to create? The Targaryen threat would also factor heavily into this alternate history. With Tywin's resources and the Stark family's strategic position in the North, they could have forced the Targaryens into irrelevance. The realm, fractured as it was during Robert Baratheon's rebellion, would have been much more stable under a united Stark-Lannister front. Rather than allowing the Targaryen exiles to build support in the east, the combined power of the North and Westerlands could have crushed their efforts before they gained momentum. This might have led to the end of the Targaryen threat far earlier, preventing the tumultuous return of Daenerys and the eventual destruction of Westeros during her reign. But what of the other noble houses? The Tyrells, the Martells, and even the Baratheons, all of whom were vying for dominance, would have had to adjust to the new power structure. House Tyrell, a house of immense wealth and influence, would likely have been forced to ally with the Starks and Lannisters, realizing that opposing them would be futile. The Martells, always looking for a chance to exact revenge for the death of their family members in Robert's rebellion, would have been forced into a delicate position. Their loyalty, however, could have been bought through strategic marriages or promises of power. In this scenario, the Martells might have chosen to align with the Starks and Lannisters rather than risk facing their wrath. Yet, even with all these political advantages, there would be no guarantee of lasting peace. The foundation of the Stark-Lannister alliance would always have been built on necessity rather than trust. Tywin Lannister was known for his desire for total control, and even with Ned Stark's strong leadership, Tywin might have seen the Stark family as nothing more than a pawn in his grand scheme for power. It is possible that the alliance would eventually fracture due to Tywin's insatiable hunger for control and Ned's commitment to maintaining honor and integrity. The Starks themselves, particularly Ned, would have faced their own internal struggles. Ned Stark's personal sense of justice might have eventually clashed with the political games that Tywin Lannister was so skilled at playing. Ned believed in the concept of right and wrong, and he didn't hesitate to make tough decisions based on those beliefs. Would he have been able to stomach Tywin's manipulations? Or would he have risked the collapse of the alliance in order to preserve his own sense of honor? In this scenario, the War of the Five Kings might never have occurred, or at least not in the same way. Without the Lannisters and Starks at odds, the political instability that led to the rise of the Baratheons would have been minimized. With Ned Stark and Tywin Lannister at the helm, Westeros could have avoided the massive civil wars that ultimately tore the realm apart. Robert Baratheon's rebellion might have been suppressed early on, and the Lannisters would not have been forced to take the Iron Throne through deceit and manipulation. In this alternate reality, Westeros would have been shaped by the alliance of two powerful men: Ned Stark, the honorable ruler of the North, and Tywin Lannister, the ruthless tactician who always played to win. But even in their combined strength, the question remains, could two men with such different views on power, honor, and loyalty ever truly build a lasting alliance? The answer, like so much in Game of Thrones, would be uncertain, shaped by ambition, loyalty, and the ever-present desire for power.